listening to From the Pink Seats podcast of the State of Louisville Podcast Network. Now, here's your hosts, Jacob Lane, Matt McGavin, and Vince Lococo.
Well. Welcome from the Pink Seats podcast. We've got some explaining to do. Certainly not the show we expected, but hey, I heard somebody say that 1 week season thing goes both ways. I think it was Jack Plummer. But we are back to talk about Louisville football. And yeah, man, I don't know. I've got a lot to walk back. But hey, ACC Championship, baby. That's what we'll get into tonight. From the Pink Seats podcast, yeah, Jacob Lane, Matt McGavick, Vince Lococo. How we doing, fellas?
Well, it's like you said, definitely not the position I thought we would find ourselves in. Oh, how the turntables. But yeah, there's still more football to be played. There's still two big games left for Louisville. There's this and most likely the Orange Bowl. So yeah, the prospect of a special season is still very much on the table. Is it dampened a little bit? Yeah, sure. Absolutely. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But, just looking forward, baby.
Yes, that's right. Vince?
Yeah, I'm fine. I had a good Thanksgiving. Everything went well with the family. So thanks for asking. I know you were concerned. Mm-hmm. Saw some professional MMA fights, some local MMA fights on the night before Thanksgiving. That was fun. Trinity's going to play in the state championship again. So nothing new there. Just rinse and repeat on that. And outside that, nothing really eventful happened this past week. Oh,
yeah. Nothing in your life. Well, we will get into the nothings of Vincent Lococo's life throughout the show as we talk about some football that may or may not have happened, as well as some football that will definitely happen this weekend in Charlotte. ACC Championship. That's a big kind of monumental moment for the show here. So kudos to us and all of our hard work. We've been grinding.
Did it.
Yeah, we did it, boys. Yeah, that's right, man.
Well, what the team doesn't realize is we always record this week. They're just now catching up.
Yeah, that's right, man. That's right.
We don't miss conference championship week.
Well, we are presented by Frankfort Avenue Liquors and Wine. You can find them on Frankfort Avenue, right next to Manhattan Project at 2115 Frankfort Avenue. Thanks to them, they bring you the show. And the From the Pink Seats podcast is a part of the State of Louisville Podcast Network, which is powered by Kern's Corner. So shout out to our friends there. Go and support both of them. A lot of great places in Louisville, and those are two of the best. So support them, support the show, subscribe anywhere you get your podcast from the Pink Seats podcast. You can find us also on YouTube at the State of Lou. And of course, follow us on Twitter at Pink Seats Pod, at U of L Report. Check out the Louisville Report of Sports Illustrated, where there is in fact no AI generated articles. That's what
I am a real person. I can confirm that I am real. I am tangible.
Other than that, Matt will be giving no statements tonight, no questions. We will take no further moments away from the show to talk about AI generated articles on the Sports Illustrated network. No, we won't. But Matt, we're not sure. He shows up every week, but AI does crazy things, man. They really can make your mind do some crazy stuff. But yeah, hey, Louisville football, Kentucky football, we'll get into that. No Vince's game notes, at least not in the traditional sense. We're just going to dive into some of the key moments because I think we all know where this game kind of fell apart for Louisville in the third quarter. We'll walk through some of that. I've got some highs and some lows that I also want to kind of walk through and some concerns that I have for Louisville football going into Florida State weekend. And of course, we'll talk about Florida State. We'll talk about the ACC Championship. We'll talk about the college football playoff. The new rankings are out. And I think that there's some pretty big things that are happening that are lining up well for at least the ACC. I mean, for Louisville, you go in, you do your job and let things fall where they may. For Florida State, obviously, you control your own destiny at this point. But we've got some other stuff that we'll dive into. The transfer portal starting to heat up for Louisville a little bit, as well as some other things as the offseason creeps in. It's like free agency kicks off the last game of the year ends. These guys are in the portal already. There's guys that probably were in the portal playing in their last game of the season. Like for sure, we had a little bit of toe in the portal and playing on the football field. But yeah, before we do that, we'll get into happy hour with our friends from Mr. and Mrs. Bourbon. You can find them on any shelves, or at least I should say most shelves across the city of Louisville, a lot of across the state, the DMA. You can find those bottles. Some of the best bourbon that you can get out there as a holiday gift. I can't encourage you enough to go out and cop that and give that to a friend this Christmas, this holiday season. But they bring you happy hour tonight as we talk about some of the best things around football. And let's first cheers to falling every once in a while. And I put failing, but also falling. I will say, Vince, this probably won't come to any surprise to you, but as a guy who never really got to play like any serious football, the football entrances always intrigue me. I'm very intrigued at being, whether it's the mask or the sledgehammer, like Mackay McNeil used to. Like, I'm all for a dramatic entrance, but I will say one of my biggest concerns when I think about myself in that moment is falling down, running out, because it is disastrous. I mean, we saw this weekend at Oklahoma, I believe was who it was. And it was our good friend from Clemson, whose name is escaping me right now.
Brent Venables.
Yes, thank you. Brent Venables just eats it. And all of a sudden you see a 10-foot high stack of Oklahoma players. Like, it's, I mean, it's about as bad as it gets, man. Vince, did that ever happen to you? Did you ever fall coming out of the entrance?
It never happened, like, to me, but it was always something that I definitely was conscious of. I thought of it every time running out of the tunnel. Like, the smoke is always like extremely cold, and I always remember that I was like, I didn't know if there was like a cord or something right there because you can't really see your feet. So, I always like try to step like a little bit longer whenever you get to the edge of like the tunnel right there, just in case. But I mean, that's pretty wild. It's hard to top that.
It is. And look, if you put Matt and I in the tunnel coming out for the game, this is probably happening. Like, we're big feet tripping
absolutely.
over each other. The whole team's going down.
Big guys here in the crowd. Yeah.
Right. We've seen some really disastrous moments from Oklahoma. They're also, I'm pretty sure, the school where the carriage fell apart last season, or the folks who drive that thing on the horses. I don't know what they call that.
That's never good.
The Sooner Schooner. Yeah, I remember that. That was like a couple years ago where
it's never good when you have live animals.
No, it never goes well for any live animal people. But I will say, this isn't on the sheet, but cheers to the good boys. Kirk Herbstreit. This might be my favorite new tradition in college football, is seeing him take his golden retriever to each of his locations and let the dog just roll around on the field. Like, that's awesome, man. And
well,
that's the good content I need.
So Auburn has the eagle that flies around like pregame, right? The War Eagle. Yeah. Like, could you imagine if that thing was just like, you know what? Today, I'm going to take somebody's eyeball.
I think that happened, man. That happened. I know that definitely happened at like an Atlanta Hawks game one time. Like the Hawks
went
like
a dozen Auburn fans in the crowd. Like, I've been waiting on this moment right here.
Didn't the Seahawk in Seattle like go into the crowd or go like land on someone that shouldn't have? Yeah. I feel like I remember that happening at some point.
It might have been our good friends up in Philadelphia. The Thong Boys in Philadelphia could have been the eagle up there. I don't know if they fly eagles around. I feel like that's probably not allowed in the United States.
Hope we get a team called the Condors and they bring a condor out there. That'd be pretty funny.
Yeah. So I thought that was really funny. But speaking of great moments from the weekend, this one coming from here locally, and this is actually something I'm sure a lot of people have been keeping up with, but obviously the injury to Paris Jones against Louisville in the Virginia game that sent him to the hospital, had to have some form of spine surgery. And we saw that video last week of him encouraging fans to attend the game and then ultimately stood up. But we now see he's been discharged from Frazier and we'll get to go back home. And I don't know if you all saw the video of him, like the physical therapy workout. Like, that's super impressive, because I was thinking about, like, I'm not even sure I could do that right now. Like, dude, like, in all seriousness, I would.
Yeah, Bosu balls are very hard to balance on to begin with. So the fact that he's doing that's remarkable.
Yeah. So cheers to the bounce back, man. I mean, that's one of the best stories of the year. Honestly, just being able to come back from such a scary moment. And shout out to the folks at U of L hospital and then at Frazier where he did his rehab. I mean, that's great stuff to get him in and out of here in 3 weeks from a really serious spine injury. It sounds like. I mean, we need to check with our friends from WebMD, Presley's sister, and Vince's guy. But I mean, I would say that's probably not the typical turnaround for folks who suffer that.
I can't believe we really went out here and gave out that kind of medical advice of my buddy, WebMD, and Presley's sister.
I still and you said it in that episode. I forget who it was. You said it so nonchalantly that it is still one of my favorite moments of the year, maybe ever on this show. But how about this? Cheers to retreads. We saw a report earlier today, some news hitting close to home of a potential 2.0, and now we in fact know for sure 2.0 will happen in Fayetteville, Arkansas. The unlikeliest reunion in college football. Matt, give me your instant thoughts about Bobby Petrino in Arkansas.
My first thought was, what the fuck? I'm pretty sure that's how a lot of people react. Like, how can you rehire a guy who you fired for an ethical reason. It's not like how with Bobby in Louisville, how he left to go to the Falcons because he wanted to take on the NFL. Bobby was fired because he had a mistress on the back of his motorcycle. Like, what? Like, what is Sam Pittman really that desperate to keep his job that he's going to bring over Bobby? What?
I mean, he's one of the smartest offensive minds out there, but ethically, it's
He
not
is.
right. But is the SEC have they ever been ethical?
No, you got Hugh Freeze as the head coach of Auburn, man.
I
Like,
mean,
like we're throwing all ethical.
Urban Meyer, Florida.
Yeah, all
Like,
ethical matters out the window.
Yeah,
I mean,
you don't even have to get into that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is what it is. I think I think offensive coordinator is the perfect role for Coach P, and if he can realize, his faults as a person, it's never too late for somebody to change, or so I've been told. But if he can realize some of his faults, and I mean, if he can turn into a cool guy, then he'd be a damn good football coach.
Here's a fun question for you: over or under 2.5 years before Bobby's a head coach again in college football?
I don't know. If they have a lot of success at Arkansas, I mean, it depends on where his ego's at nowadays. I could see him riding it out as an offensive coordinator, but I could also see it as FU. I want to prove everybody wrong and go be a head coach again and get the band back together.
I could also see a third scenario in which this would be the end for Bobby Petrino. Like, you fail at this job, say Sam Pittman gets fired at the end of 2024. That is probably the end for Bobby Petrino's coaching.
Well, it's all about how he teaches his offense. If he can teach his offense, like, I don't know how Coach Petrino teaches it. I've never been in those meetings. I've only been in because he always met with the quarterbacks and those guys and Nick. So I've only been in running back and tight end position rooms, and just judging by how how Nick would teach signals. If Coach P can teach his offense well, then I think stuff will run fine.
Okay, I just thought of a hypothetical, and I want to run this by you guys just to see your reaction. Let's just imagine, things are going well for Bobby down in Arkansas, and then here Brian Brohm, things are going well, but he's got the opportunity to take a head coaching gig somewhere, so he takes it. Do you bring Bobby as the OC here?
I think Brian's laughing with us as he hears that comment.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts on that.
Well, let's keep it moving right along here. We've got some more cheers to coaching rumors. We're going to start to see this become, again, as I mentioned, the offseason picking up bigger storyline. And today, I think it was a report from On3 that Florida could potentially look to hire Mark Ivey as a defensive line coach there to replace one of the guys that they just fired. I think they fired their secondary coach, their defensive coordinator, their linebackers coach. They essentially cleaned the defensive side of the house, which, I mean, I'm sorry, but when your quarterback is Graham Mertz, like, you're firing the wrong people, in my opinion. But as a story for another day, how the hell Billy Napier even has a job anymore with a program like Florida is just insane to me. But I don't know. Mark Ivey is obviously more, I would say more, I don't want to say, I'm trying to figure out how the right way to word this. He is more loyal to Louisville, I guess, than he is to Coach Brohm in terms of, he's worked now for two staffs, more so than Brohm bringing him here. So I guess maybe the connection isn't as strong, and leaving maybe wouldn't be as difficult. But I would think that the next step up for him is a DC job. I don't know if leaving from the linebackers coach to go be the D-line for maybe one more year before that staff gets fired is the right move, when maybe another year here as the linebackers coach promotes you to a DC next year at another place, or potentially say Ron English or, Mark Hagan were to depart theoretically for another job. Wouldn't be the biggest shock in the world to see these guys start to bounce around. Maybe Mark Ivey becomes Louisville's defensive coordinator. So what do you think, Vince?
I don't know if Ivey would really want the DC job. I know he likes to be, I mean, you all know as well, he likes to be really hands-on with his position group and really, into that and everything. I mean, it's a good thing to be having people try and poach your coaches. I mean, Ivey's a phenomenal
That means
guy.
You're doing something right, yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, myself, and I'm sure there's a line of 10 to 15 other Louisville alumni that would fight everybody from Florida to try and keep Mark Ivey in the city of Louisville. But I think this could be, there's a couple staffs around the country. Florida State had a guy who was there for a number of years, like 20 plus years. And, Louisville had Coach K whenever I got here as a freshman, who was the quote unquote special teams coach. He's just the old guy on staff who's always been on staff. I really hope that Mark Ivey is that guy that's like, Jeff Brohm, whatever, goes to the NFL in 10 years, and we're like, man, how the hell is Mark Ivey still on staff through 3 staffs and all these years? And, like, man, this is awesome, though. We love having him. Can't imagine Louisville football without him. I hope it turns into one of those situations, like his mentor, Jerry Moore at App State.
Yeah, I can see that. And plus, with how Florida is right now, I mean, yeah, it's the SEC, but I mean, Florida's 5-7 right now. They're not going to a bowl. I mean, that's a lateral move.
No, and
at best.
Job security.
And yeah, you'll probably get a nice bag, but you'll become a lame duck essentially. I mean, let's not sit here and act as if we all think that Billy Napier is going to be a guy who can turn it around. What has he shown through 2 seasons at Florida to make you believe that? I saw
a good hairline with 2 failing seasons.
Yeah, I mean, again, he makes college football a little bit more handsome, I guess, overall, you could say. But, hey, speaking of that, we might have the competition for the top of the top when it comes to the handsome rankings in college football, because we're starting to see, again, some of these rumors, Cliff Kingsbury connected to the Houston job. My man is chasing the Frank Reich. Dude, I am here for the Frank Reich approach. Get a job, get fired. Get a job, get fired. Collect the bags along the way. When you're that handsome, you will continue to find work, and he will probably fail at Houston as well. But how about Cliff Kingsbury coming back to
I think he looks like so young that 5 years from now he'll be fired or whatever from his whatever 5th job in 5 years, and we'll be like, well, but he's still young and he's doing that young and innovative offense. You just got to wait for it to like catch on.
Just got to get the right personnel for it.
Yeah, right.
And somebody finally will be like, what is that offense? And you're like, I don't know, man. He's still
I don't know.
He's
like
building
55 years. He's like 60-some years old. We're still trying to figure it out.
Right. That's exactly right. But I will say, I mean, he seems like the kind of guy who could, in theory, get Houston. Maybe I just kind of contradicts myself, but maybe with the right NIL support behind him, he is a former NFL coach. I don't know, Nebraska.
Maybe if Houston had Pat Mahomes, because I mean, isn't that who Kingsbury's QB was at Texas Tech?
Yeah, but didn't he also?
Or was that Leach?
No, you're right. His claim to fame is Pat Mahomes, and I also think they had a couple of guys that went through there right around the same time. I'm drawing a blank. I know Baker Mayfield was one of them that went on to Oklahoma, but
wasn't Pat Mahomes like considered underdeveloped coming out of college?
Well, I mean, he was
that's why he
was very raw coming out of college.
He sat out with the Alex Smith approach for Andy Reid early in his tenure in Kansas City, and then obviously we saw what happened. So it's gonna be really interesting to see some of the coaching rumors. Just if you're curious, I know we're gonna be kind of going long-winded with this segment, but there are some intriguing jobs open. The Duke job is open, which Mike Elko, I guess, got the hint, listened to Vince, and finally realized, like, where is this place? This is not a real football program. I need to go to Texas A&M.
I shot him a text, and we discussed things, and we got it together.
Yeah, there you go. Indiana is open. You also have, as I mentioned, Houston, Oregon State, Syracuse. So you got some Power 5 jobs that are available. And I'm going to be curious to see if there's any kind of mid-major to maybe someone like an Indiana that has an interest in Brian Brohm. I mean, I know that he kind of is a behind-the-scenes guy, but he's interviewed the last couple of years for other OC positions. He's now the OC of a team that is 10-2. When you have big years, your coaches get plucked and become head coaches. They become, maybe he wants to be the play caller at some situation. So I'm really interested to see kind of what that looks like for Louisville and if anything comes of that. But some interesting jobs open, and I'm sure there will be plenty more that change over. And then we'll do one more of these final. We'll kind of combine them. Cheers to victories. Cheers to the NFL this weekend. Great weekend for the Ravens. Vince, you dropped this in here for Trey Clark. I'm going to guess.
You guys didn't click it.
No, I know what it is. It's the backflip, right? Yes. It's the backflip.
Oh my God. That's unreal. Anybody that can do freaking backflip and full equipment like that is impressive. Like, I know Jacob's a big backflip guy going back to his Trevor Reed days.
I think it says a lot about
only if they're offensive linemen.
Yeah, I mean, hey, Tylen Evans did a backflip last year, and I mean, we saw some of the athleticism that we got there.
But NFL intros, that's like something you've wished, like you've seen Ray Lewis, dude. Ray Lewis, Brian Dawkins, some of the all-time great NFL intros. If you can really nail one of those, I think you can become a household name somewhere at an NFL franchise.
Yeah, I definitely do not disagree. And then shout out to the Ravens. Sole possession at first place. They go on a bye week, what feels like the latest bye week ever. I have Lamar just like you do, Vince, in fantasy football. I have some other Ravens players, and I was like, is this bye week going to ever hit? Like, at what point am I going to have to pick up another quarterback?
Yeah,
Unfortunately, it's this week. We'll see. Maybe Kenny Pickett. I don't know. What do you guys think? Who should I hit?
Who are you picking up?
I don't know, man. I think it's going to have to be Kenny Pickett. Maybe I take a chance on Bryce Young this week.
The Steelers did look pretty good after they fired Matt Canada.
Yeah, man. Cheers to teams in the SEC, and don't hire Matt Canada or the Big Ten. Like, just don't. Iowa, you feel like the candidate to do. Don't do that. Don't hire him. Somebody, please.
He's probably better than Brian Ferentz, though.
Yeah, that's right.
We're all better than Brian Ferentz.
That's right. All right. That is happy hour with our good friends, Mr. and Mrs. Bourbon Company. Shout out to Russ Smith. Shout out to the Bourbon Company that is, slowly taking over the world, right? Russ is playing over in Italy right now and doing big things internationally, globally. This man is an entrepreneur to its truest sense. We're going to see him on Shark Tank someday. Like, I'm predicting it now. But shout out to them, and make sure that, again, you give that as a gift this holiday season. Perfect time to do so. Not a perfect time to give us a gift this weekend, Kentucky. I thought my gift to them was great. 2 middle fingers almost the entire game. Middle fingers to the band, middle fingers to the fans, middle fingers to everyone. Like Jack Harlow did as well. Just tough all around, though, to just get punched in the face with karma.
We had a great time at the start, though. We had a good time.
We did, man. The only thing missing from the tailgate Saturday morning was Matt McGavick wandering over there. You know what? Listen to this. Last season, Matt stopped by for beers a couple times. He would stop in, say hello. Matt did not text me one damn time this year before a game. Not once. All 8 home games, Matt didn't text one time. I'm like, okay, all right, I get it. That's fine. I'm not inviting you to the tailgate then. So Matt missed out on a great tailgate. Shout out to the Martins.
If it makes you feel any better, I didn't tailgate at all for the Kentucky game.
You know what? It doesn't make me feel better, Matt. You visited somebody. It's somewhere before the game. And
you gotta give a shout out to Max Martin. As the ultimate snob.
That was fantastic.
Oh my god.
Yeah, man. Shout out to Max, and shout out to Max and Isaac both manning the grill, the bacon, the hash browns, the fried egg and cheese bologna sandwich. Oh, the donuts. There was just everything. There was a heater. There was drinks. There was food. They went all out. So kudos to you guys, Vince. You guys do it right over there. So thank you for the invite. That was nice to do that for the last game of the year. I will say, man, I ate the sandwich. I loved it. It was great. Presented no problems for me like I thought it would. But we obviously know that Louisville lost, and I expressed some concern to you about eating the sandwich. The final game of the season, after I had not eaten the damn sandwich all year long, I feel like we might be able to once again point this loss back.
So what you're saying is it's your fault for messing up the vibes. That's what I'm hearing.
So I'm walking out of the stadium, right, and I run into one of my buddies I played basketball with at Trinity, Mason Buren, and he's like, "So what do we do now? Sandwich, what do we do with the sandwich?" And I'm like, oh my god,
no,
the time to be asking me about bologna sandwiches.
I love that people are asking you casually about that now, but this weekend is the true test. We're gonna really learn this weekend. You're gonna get the fried egg and cheese bologna sandwich. Emmy is gonna get the big chick. I'm not gonna eat a sandwich. And we're going to test this theory, okay? Because we've had too many variables moving around, and those who work in any form of, whether it's in marketing, advertising, any data collection, any kind of test, the variables have to be right in order to really, truly learn the outcome. So this weekend, let's control the variables. I will not eat the sandwich, although I will say, Matt, he grilled it on a flat top grill with bacon grease. And when I tell you this was the best breakfast sandwich I've ever had in my entire life, I am not kidding. He even sliced the bologna into little pizza slices, like little triangles. It was beautiful. Like, I felt the love in every bite, man.
Okay, so I'm going to teach you, Jacob. Before we get to Kentucky, fellas, I'm going to teach you how to cook bologna. You have to cut the sides. Otherwise, it's going to bubble up in the middle, and you're not going to get the full thing crispy. Matt probably already knows this. I feel like Matt's a bologna eater. But you got to cut the sides or like poke holes in it. Otherwise, it's going to be just a bubble. And the outside's going to be crispy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
You got to pop it.
Yeah. There we go. All right. Let's talk about Kentucky. Yeah. This game, frustrating. 38-31. Looked like Louisville, honestly, even into the final couple of minutes, was going to win this game. There's been some bad quarters this year. But the third quarter, while only giving up 14 points, they gave up 17 in the fourth quarter to Kentucky. I felt like the third quarter was the punch in the face that I had a gut feeling was coming at some point. I thought whether it be Florida State, whether it be in a Orange Bowl or a potential college football playoff, like eventually you're going to meet somebody that is able to provide that. And that's what Kentucky did late in this game. And really, the thing that's the most frustrating is it wasn't that Kentucky was better than Louisville. And yes, that may ruffle some feathers in Lexington. Like, yes, they won the game 38-31. In all reality, Kentucky outplayed Louisville in a lot of ways. But if not for a 55-yard wheel route, followed by a 25-yard wheel route, followed by a kickoff return, or I might have those mixed up in order, but following those two touchdowns back-to-back in a matter of, 5 minutes was the gut punch to Louisville that we didn't see coming after going into halftime feeling, I don't know, pretty decent about it. I don't know. Fellas, let's just start this. Opening thoughts. We'll get into the specifics of it here in a second, but just give me your initial quick gut reaction to this game.
I mean, it's hard to have any sort of reaction to this game other than the fact that Louisville just shot themselves in the foot too many times. I mean, credit to Kentucky and some of their plays. I mean, Ray Davis played lights out. Leary looked like he had been at NC State. He looked the best he had all season and looked like he never had an arm injury at all. And the defense gave Louisville some fits. But I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, if Louisville doesn't commit those egregious mistakes, I mean, this is going to be like a double-digit win if Louisville performs better on special teams and doesn't give up that kickoff return. If they don't have both those second half fumbles, which directly lead to 10 Kentucky points, I mean, Louisville probably runs away with this game. Then if there's not that giant shift in momentum in the span of 5, 6, 7 minutes, I mean, Louisville probably is able to perform at a much higher level down the stretch because they didn't play well in the second half at all. And I think that's because of the way things snowballed, like starting in that third quarter. So, and it was more so of just how Louisville was playing versus how Kentucky was playing. So it's of my personal opinion, and I'm sure a lot of people share this, that like it's not necessarily that Kentucky won, it's that Louisville lost.
Vince, what do you think, man? I mean, I know you walked out just like me, very upset, very much in disbelief.
I wasn't mad. I was more, disappointed, as your parents like to say. It just felt like a gut punch. Being able to sit there and literally say, all right, we lost the game here, here, and here. And, not even have to really go back and watch anything. And it just being that blatantly obvious that's what sucks for me. It's the stuff that's preventable that we haven't really done all year that, comes to, I don't know, just rose to the top against Kentucky. It just wasn't fun. I don't know. It felt, you want to talk about getting punched in the face. That's what it felt like whenever the third quarter started happening. For me, at least, sitting up there in the stands, I was like, this, I mean, you knew almost like this isn't gonna end well. So, and Jack having 2 interceptions, like for me, 2 turnovers, the 1 interception, like I'm not really.
That was a Hail Mary. I mean,
yeah, like I'm not counting that personally, but the 2 turnovers, the fumbles, man, that like, and the kickoff return, I mean, they've been bringing it out all game. We've been kicking it in the end zone all game. Fill your lanes and stay in your gaps. And I mean, yeah, that's and I mean, I know people are probably gonna, tweet us pictures of the holds and everything going on those plays, but I mean, come
on that note, I don't want to be the guy that blames the refs because at the end of the day, the refs were not the reason that Louisville lost this game. I mean, let's just get that out of the way right now. But I refuse to believe for a second that the most penalized team, right there, the most penalized team in the SEC was not called for a flag one
They were
time.
but
a perfect game.
No, they had a
They
flag.
declined.
Louisville
They declined it.
They had
Like
a
an
penalty.
accepted penalty. Okay. Okay. Tomatoes, tomatoes. But you know what I'm saying? Like this is Kentucky is an undisciplined team, and they certainly weren't disciplined in this game because they wanted to start fights from the get-go. I mean, that's just been the Soup's MO.
It is, but I will say, though, the thing about this game that I thought was really interesting from the start was Chris Bell that dude came out the tunnel on one, man. The first play of the game, I mean, he throws a punch. He's really lucky he didn't get ejected on the
give me 11
game.
Give me 11.
Trust me. I'm here with you. But Louisville was letting a lot of the things Kentucky was doing get to them early on. And I never really felt like it had a true impact on the game, but it was just frustrating, right? It was really frustrating to see Chris Bell later in the game get a hands to the face penalty on a play where him and a defender are going at it, and they might as well have just called offsetting penalties. Like, what are we doing here? But what I really want to point out about this game, I feel like most folks left the stadium once again saying Jack Plummer sucks. This is Jack Plummer. If it's not for the fumble, Louisville loses. If it's not for the interception, or Kentucky, sorry, if not for the fumble, Louisville wins. If it's not for that interception, the numbers don't look as bad. Whatever the case is, people wanted to blame him. But I felt like watching this game, this was his best game of the season from top to bottom, maybe outside of Notre Dame. But not a single bad throw, not one that I could point to and say, like, that's a bad throw, Jack. In fact, I was extremely impressed with the ability to dump the ball down in this game. Had several really nice plays to Gary Endo, as well as Jawar, as well as even to Joey Gatewood on the touchdown, and Nate Kariski as well. Jack's numbers on third down in this game were absolutely insane. And it's part of the reason why today we see Jack being acknowledged as a third-team All-ACC quarterback, despite Louisville fans wanting to bench him every single game at some point this season.
You can't. Yeah. Jaws too. Like, you cannot make those mistakes against anybody, man. Like, it doesn't matter if it's Kentucky, Virginia, NC State, Tech, A&M. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you are not going to win a football game doing that stuff. And I mean, we can talk about Kentucky being undisciplined all we want, but I mean, that's undisciplined football right there, and that's what got to be.
Yeah, and if you want to continue on with that trend of undisciplined football, I feel like once again Louisville's defense was playing like they did against Miami, and I don't know. I'm having a really hard time figuring out if the book is just out on them and teams have figured out how to attack. I don't know what to do with all of a sudden TJ Quinn and Jalen Alderman really struggling to tackle in the open field. In fact, Jalen Alderman, is still a really young player and has had a really nice season, but easily the worst game of the season for him.
TJ Quinn in coverage as well, Jacob. I mean, on the wheel routes, like TJ is a lot like CJ Avery, two guys that came in as safeties and converted to inside linebackers. And, you expect them to be able to cover running backs and tight ends like it's the back of their hand. And, that was really surprising for me, is to see him make those kind of mistakes and be like that behind the ball. Just poor angles, honestly.
And it's been like that for the last few games. I mean, the front seven was establishing an identity, of stopping the run. The linemen were winning their one-on-one battles semi-regularly to kind of throw things off with how the ball carrier, wants to approach things. And then right behind them are the linebackers kind of cleaning up things. I mean, linebackers and some safeties and some defensive backs, but mainly the linebackers coming in and swarming to the ball and doing a good job of getting the tackle on the very first attempt, wrapping up, bringing them to the ground, things like that. And then ever since the Virginia game, I don't know what has happened, whether it's just been purely a miscommunication in the game plan or something with the coaching game plan, something that the players aren't executing right. But the tackling has been flat out atrocious for the last 3 games. They are just throwing arm tackles. They're not trying to wrap up at all. They're taking completely awful pursuit angles. They're not swarming to the ball like as a team hardly as much. It's almost, I can't.
Like two
It's almost
completely different defenses.
Yeah, it's almost inexplicable how different they are in this regard, because they had looked so dominant and so suffocating when it came to playing against the run, and then now all of a sudden they're not really getting very many stops right at or just past the line of scrimmage. They're letting guys go after the first tackle attempt, and then as a result, they're not having guys crash behind them and get that guy and clean it up, and they're going for huge chunks of yardage as a result.
Yeah, safety's got to show up as that second level defender. I mean, I get you have to play pass, but you have to play run too. That's why safety is one of the harder positions. And I mean, there have been a couple occasions where you could point out where they're not filling the gap right, or they're coming in with an arm tackle. But it's not just singling out the safeties. It's like Matt said, it's the linebackers too. It's the corner. Like, it's collectively as a group, it is not making sense.
It's bad. It's bad. And I have a couple of instances that I've marked here, Jacob's game notes, TM, for the show, particularly to call out a couple of these. I mean, it's just infuriating. The second half, there's a stretch in which we talked about you have the kickoff return for a touchdown, and then they come back on a 2-play drive. Isaiah Cummings on the 55-yard wheel route, in which Mason Reiger I don't know if he forgets the play or what. There's a miscommunication, but Mason drops back, looks like he's going to drop into a zone, and then it the last second realizes he needs to be following Isaiah Cummings down the boundary with him, and that ultimately allows that big play. And then on the second play of that drive, you have TJ Quinn and Jalen Alderman watch Ray Davis Jr. run right into the end zone on a wheel route. I mean, they both just right behind him. Very frustrating. That then leads to Louisville fumbling on the next possession, and then they come back on the following drive, right? So at this point, the game is 24-21 Louisville. They have them on a 4th and 2. Ray Davis gets the ball, and if Jalen Alderman just makes the tackle, it's a 3-yard tackle for loss, and it's the end of the drive. Kentucky doesn't go down and kick the field goal, and it's a completely different game at that point. Your momentum swings right back in your favor. It's not just them. I don't understand what happened in this game. Quincy Riley, this is easily the worst game of the season he's played. I'm not sure if it was in the particular coverages that they were calling. I'm not sure if it was a matchup problem, but whether it was Barryon Brown or Dane Key, both of them made massive plays on him. And it's super frustrating to see this all happen in the final game of the season against your rival. This is just not being who you are and playing within yourself. And there are several more instances of this. I mean,
those are instances too. Like, Jay, you would expect, rival coming in, 2 young and hungry wide receivers, and Barryon Brown and Dan Key, who have quite frankly had below average years of what they were coming in expected to do this season. I mean, they wanted to come in and make a statement and show out. Like, this is, if we beat Louisville and we come out and have the games that we have, what we did X, Y, and Z before doesn't really matter, because we just did what we did on the field today. And both those kids are 2 phenomenal freaking football players. But I mean, those are the moments in Quincy Riley and the other DBs that you are licking your chops for, and you're saying, all right, this is where we sent, like Jair, like this is like games where like, all right, cool. Jair's got that side of the field. You don't even got to worry about it. Everything else, just worry about everything else.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it sound like it was all negative, right? You had great moments where you get Cam Wilson with a beautiful pass rush move, just absolutely flawless on the first drive of the game that ends that drive. And then you have, Mason Reiger and Ashton were in the backfield all game long. One adjustment.
The defense in the first half was good.
Yeah.
They only allowed 7 points. And I don't know what kind of adjustments that Kentucky and Stoops made, but like it clearly worked.
Well, the adjustments where they got the ball more. I mean, that's frankly, true, in the first half, Kentucky has 4 drives. In the second half, they're gifted 3, essentially 2 drives off of turnovers, right? I mean, the stretch at the beginning of that half was just insane with the back-to-back touchdowns.
It
was fun. Don't get me wrong. Like, it was great. The stadium atmosphere was insane. I mean, it was an absolute party at times, but it was also some of the saddest moments at times. And
you can't turn the ball over and expect to win these games, man. Like, I mean, it makes me want to scream it till I'm blue in the face. Like, it's just seeing it right there. To me, I don't know how you guys feel about this game, but for me, this one reminds me a lot of whenever Coach Strong lost his year 1 game. And it just feels like maybe not the time yet. Maybe this just wasn't the year for us to beat them yet. Whatever. But the pressure is on and the pressure is there. And I feel like they can feel the pressure just as much as we kind of feel the momentum of how Louisville football is going in the right direction.
Yeah, I disagree. I felt like in that game, Kentucky played so free, so without any kind of pressure on them it was just their game. They knew.
Yeah, I
it.
felt it was more tense. I felt they played a little bit. Both sides really played tense, is what it felt like to me. And until the third quarter, until stuff kind of momentum was really swing. It felt like everybody was, they were just, tight. It just felt like they were really tight, and it just.
And Kentucky in the first half, I mean, they missed a couple of plays that would have been absolute backbreakers. I mean, Dane Key drops, I believe, a touchdown or a big play. I can't remember if it was a touchdown, but drops another one in the second half. They've got, they got a couple of plays that they drew up that just, for whatever reason, I think there's one play where Storm Duck gets his hand in there late. So there were some moments in the first half where it did look like Kentucky was close. And once they kind of got into the end zone in the second half, I mean, it really just kind of opened Pandora's box for Louisville, and they weren't able to close it. And, I think the one thing I have to commend Kentucky on, and this really hurts because he talked his game. He talked shit all week long, or in that moment that went viral, and ultimately got the last laugh. Deion Walker was unstoppable in this game. And I thought Louisville did a fantastic job in the mid-second quarter to the early part of the third quarter of running a lot of really good misdirection plays. When they did run through, in an I form, they ran behind Dwayne Martin. Dwayne Martin, in my opinion, was the MVP of the first half. I mean, he was incredible. But they did some really nice misdirection things, including, I think it was a fourth down run to Isaac Gariendo where he completely fakes and runs back outside, beats his man to the first down marker. But late, they got away from it. And I think Brian Hudson and Michael Gonzalez and Austin Collins, I think they all played good games. I think they played, solid. I just think Deion Walker is an NFL top 10 type of player. Like this dude.
Him and JJ Weaver, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they were incredible. And as the game wore on, the interior of the offensive line just really struggled to contain. I mean, it's four guys over like 365, man. I mean, that's a big ass group of dudes just leaning on you all day long. Like eventually you're going to wear down with how much you run the football. And ultimately it just wasn't meant to be. As Vince said, you have the fumble, which is just, that's probably the one moment of criticism that I have for Jack. And I talked about this a lot earlier in the season. Jack is sloppy with the football. Like he plays sloppy with it. I don't think I've ever seen a quarterback who is so like not Johnny Football Lamar, like who is just so careless with the ball, man. Jack just like the noodle pump fake, and it worked a couple of times, right? But ultimately he's trying to run with the ball in one hand with it down, and JJ Weaver makes Jackson makes a hell of a play, just full out lunging out for it and breaking that ball away. So, sometimes the bounces go your way, sometimes they don't. It's unfortunate that you have one of your worst games of the season for a lot of your kind of key players who have played so well. But as we head into Jacob's sack update and really start to put a bow on the season, you do see, some of the good things that happened in this game, including Ashton Gelati getting a sack, Cam Wilson getting a sack, as I mentioned. That takes Ashton to that 11 mark. I mean, he gets one against Florida State. He's at 12. That's second round money right there, man. I mean, Ashton has made himself a lot of money this season. And so it's now Ashton with 11, Mason with 5. And then I want to point out Ben Perry. He had 2.5 tackles for loss in this game. And one thing that I noticed was that Kentucky really made an emphasis in their offensive play calling to neutralize Ben Perry. They sent a lot of motion nearly every play his way when they ran the ball, and they did run a lot of misdirections. They had that double reverse pass, but they tried to keep Ben Perry neutralized.
They're trying to get him to check. And as soon as you can get Ben Perry thinking, okay, number 3 has now motioned across the field. Where do my eyes go now? Do they go to 2? Do they go to the guy in the backfield? Where do I go? Do I bump back in? And that's where the confusion, people don't line up right. People don't hit the right gaps. That's where that shit happens.
Yeah, but I mean, still led the team in tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss. Had a big play in coverage in the first half. So shout out to him. I know he didn't get a sack, but still, just want to. The TFLs matter around here, guys. I tell you all that every once in a while. When you don't get a lot of sacks, you got to count some other statistics, and so that will do it for Jacob's sack update. So closing thoughts. Any closing topics here as we help Matt McGavick close the book on Kentucky?
Would you trade one ACC win for this UK loss? Implication: You probably don't go to the ACC Championship.
No,
I would. No.
Yes, I get why you
one
would.
ACC loss. One.
I mean, no, because then I mean, I think you still would technically by default be in the ACC Championship because North Carolina lost that final game, but still, no, I want to play for titles. I don't want to play for the king of the state when we all know that it's the state of Louisville. TM.
Yeah, but I would much rather.
I mean, listen. I mean, I was listening to Mike Rutherford earlier today, and he made a great point. Outside of the state of Kentucky, not a lot of people pay attention to the rivalry. They don't know the ins and outs of it. They don't know that Kentucky's on a 5-game winning streak now in the rivalry. I mean, and most recruits from outside the state. And I'm probably going to say something that's going to piss a lot of people off, but the good recruits, the ones that aren't inside the state of Kentucky, not saying that there aren't good recruits in the state of Kentucky, but I mean, the recruits in the recruiting hotbeds like Florida, Texas, Georgia, California, they don't know the ins and outs of the Kentucky-Louisville rivalry and all that. What they do know is that, hey, Louisville won themselves an ACC championship over Florida State. The national media, the national narrative can say, "Oh, look at Louisville having a good year under Jeff Brohm." If Louisville goes on to win the ACC championship against Florida State, that will matter significantly more than Louisville's loss to Kentucky.
Okay, but say we don't win the ACC championship, and now you bring that recruit on campus, and you're sitting there, and the Governor's Cup trophy room is empty for the 5th straight year. You're sitting here with the empty list, your 2017 Atlantic Championship trophy and a couple watches.
The only recruits that give a fuck about the Governor's Cup are the ones inside the state of Kentucky. It's not a big deal.
I agree. They're not going to be like, oh, they haven't beat their rival in X, Y, Z, but it matters. That'll definitely be a thinking point. And if somebody's deciding between Kentucky and Louisville.
I'm not saying it doesn't. Let Kentucky have the in-state 3 stars. Louisville's got bigger fish to fry.
We're looking at K-State's quarterback right now.
I'd rather have Tyler Van Dyke, but that's my.
Oh my God, that's another discussion.
We'll get into that.
I do not want somebody with worse needs than me playing quarterback for us.
Let's get into that in the second part of the show because I do want to stay on agenda here. That's the thing about our show, right? We have guardrails that keep us from getting into the portal each week, or else we would probably spend an hour tonight debating the quarterbacks who in 2 weeks will not be in the portal, and 55 more guys will be in the portal. Like, that's how this is. This is just like the point guard situation for basketball this past summer. Like, within the first couple of days, everyone's like gung-ho. Got to get this guy, got to get this guy. Eventually, those guys are gone in a matter of moments. And
hey, I'm team put the young buck in. That's my.
Okay. We'll get it. Save that. I'm right there with you. Let's talk about that in the second half of the show. No, to answer your question, I would not, because I really do enjoy winning titles, or at least getting to play for titles. Right? We could do a Kentucky show every year, and if Louisville loses that game, there's no. Whatever. Our egos hurt. But if we get to talk about ACC championship football, right, it's a completely different game. Like, it's both football, but we're just playing a completely different level of game right now. And to me, that matters, man. Look, I mean, I get college football has become so watered down to where this game now between Louisville and Florida State really feels like everyone's finding a reason to not put Florida State in, which is going to, then put Florida State into a game in which all their players are going to leave. And then that's going to trickle down, and you're going to see Louisville go to a Pop-Tart Bowl. And then, it's just like all these games in college football don't matter. But for one more weekend, this does matter. This matters a whole lot. And Jeff Brohm in his first year could probably really make his resume about the best you can for Coach of the Year nationally, Coach of the Year in the ACC, by winning an ACC title and knocking off an undefeated Florida State team. I mean, that is a game changer. So we'll see. We'll talk about it on the other side. I think there's some interesting data about this game. I think there's some storylines. We obviously need to get in the DeLorean and have a conversation about last season and what happened, because we're going to see a familiar face from last year's game, really the hero of last year's game. So we'll get into all of that on the other side of the commercial break here. But I do want to remind you that sports betting is officially live in Kentucky, and there are a ton of sites that are offering new bettors awesome bonuses to get started. We've made it super easy for you to put all of our favorite promos into one list. Check them out. We have all of our best promos across all the sports books at bit.ly/state of Louisville. Maximize your first bets, and each time you sign up for one of the promotions, you'll be directly supporting our show. Head over to bit.ly/state of Louisville for our top offers. Offers are only available for new customers who are 18 plus, 21 plus, select sport book, and physically present in Kentucky. Please gamble responsibly. If you or a loved one has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. From the Pink Seats podcast is brought to you by the fine folks at Frankfort Avenue Liquor and Wine. You can find them at 2115 Frankfort Avenue, right next to the Manhattan Project. Full bar service and a full liquor store. Stop in there today and tell them From the Pink Seats podcast sent you. As always, I am currently sipping on some Mr. and Mrs. Bourbon. Mr. and Mrs., as you might know, is the official brand of Louisville legend Russ Smith. But what you might not know is that Mr. and Mrs. is becoming a national and global brand, shaking things up in the bourbon industry. Like basketball, bourbon has long been a passion for Russ, dating back to his college days. He studied and learned under some of the more renowned master distillers in the area. Mr. and Mrs. is more than a passion project. It's the culmination of a decade of painstaking work. Mr. and Mrs. is for everyone, from a more traditional 90 proof to a cask strength that's smooth. Be among the first to try Mr. and Mrs., the official bourbon of the state of Louisville, and From the Pink Seats podcast. On shelves anywhere you find your liquors or online at mrandmrsbourbon.com. Again, ACC Championship. I cannot say that enough. This is one of the biggest games in Louisville football history, despite this kind of lackluster roll up to this game now with Jordan Travis going out with that injury and Tate Rodemaker. Do I have that right? Tate
Rodemaker.
Rodemaker. Are we sure?
Yes.
I think we did this last year. Are we sure it's not Rodemaker?
Oh, Tate. It's nice to see you again, buddy.
Tate Rodemaker steps in, man. And the early reports are in, and it was not a great showing against Florida. So now things are looking very interesting this weekend for Louisville and Florida State. And look, my opinion, Florida State, they should be in regardless of what happens in this game. They've been one of the best teams all year long. I think that they are still in a spot that if they we'll get into the predictions and where this kind of shakes out, but I still think that they have a very strong resume. I think that they're obviously favored for a reason in this game, and that we're still going to see a very strong Florida State team. However, I think we're going to see a different type of Florida State team. This past weekend really kind of leaned into the run game with Trey Benson, who is an absolute dynamic weapon as a running back there. And I think that with what we've seen the last 2 weeks, the key storyline has to be what has Louisville learned and what can they do to stop the run?
Especially with the way that the defense has played over the last kind of few weeks, with how their defensive identity has started to kind of whittle away. I mean, they're going to have some sort of rebound game, and it's not going to come easy, because I mean, while with Florida State, because I've paid a decent bit of attention to them because they're the top team in the ACC. One of the biggest bugaboos with Florida State in the first half of the season was that, okay, when's the running game going to open up? Obviously the passing game is there. The running game has talent, but it's not really getting going. And now it's in the second half of the season, it's really started to get going, and it's been a difference. I mean, now offensively, Florida State is still not perfect. I watched that game against Florida, and yeah, they looked gruff. Now, Florida State is not very good, but playing in the swamp is not easy. It's not easy at all. So I can kind of understand why they didn't exactly look the most crisp, to say, in that first half, and how they went down 12-0 early. But I mean, some credit has to go to them for being able to rally back with a backup quarterback and perform down the stretch. That being said, their offense is not nearly what it would be in this game if Jordan Travis was still there. I mean, while Tate Rodemaker is a good quarterback, and Louisville has seen him before, they saw him in the second half of last year's game, and we know how that happened. He has the ability, but with some of the offensive struggles that Florida State has had at some points, Louisville has a chance to exacerbate this with Rodemaker in at QB instead of Jordan Travis.
This was a game that Louisville last year honestly had. I don't want to say won comfortably, but they looked like they were going to win this game going into halftime, 21-14. Florida State comes out, scores on the first drive. And then you kind of had those series of punts. Louisville ultimately takes the lead and goes up, I believe, late in the third quarter. And then really down the stretch of the game, you have these big plays that they give up. You have the turnovers. You can't capitalize on that 8-play drive. They turn the ball over on down. So and even Florida State misses a field goal late, and Louisville has the chance to win it on that final drive and can't do so. But Florida State doesn't win that game without Tate Rodemaker coming in and really finding a way to get the ball into the hands of Johnny Wilson. And this season they're going to have, they've had one of the best weapons in college football in Keon Coleman, who is built like a Ford F-150. Like, that dude is not built to play wide receiver. I feel like he's an American gladiator. I mean, he is just like DK Metcalf almost.
He is, in a way. When you create a Road to Glory football player on NCAA 14.
Yeah, make their strength 99. Yeah, man. Just an insane amount of just muscle on muscle with muscles on those muscles. And he's had a decent season. I mean, 46 receptions, 639 yards, 11 touchdowns. He has really been the kind of highlight of their passing game. But last week, just one reception. And that's what I say. And look, Matt, you tell me, maybe he got injured. Maybe the game plan just completely dictated things elsewhere. But to me, that tells a story of Florida State doesn't feel like they have to put the ball into his hands to win big games. Meaning Trey Benson, Lawrence Toafila, I never can pronounce his last name correctly. And even down to Jaheim Bell, Kyle Morlock. I mean, they've got some really dynamic tight ends, Ja'Kai Douglas, and even Trey Benson catching the ball out of the backfield. I mean, they have the weapons to really beat you. But I'm just, after last week, now I'm just waiting. Like, is this the week where the wide receiver pops off and like Keon Coleman's going to have his Zay Flowers game? Like, that's now the thoughts that have crept into my mind, because for 2 weeks, this defense has done a complete 180, and we're wondering, like, are these the same 11 guys who have been playing every week?
You got to stop the run and just force them to throw the ball. Like, that's what we're going to have to, that's to be game plan number one, is make sure that Trey Benson doesn't run all over us.
Yes, I feel more confident in them stopping the run. Like, to be completely honest, I know they've struggled the last 2 weeks, but look, you shake your head at me, Matt, but maybe I'm wrong again. Maybe I'll throw this out there, and you have your Big J journalism hat on tonight. Has Louisville faced a better set of wide receivers this year? Now, I know they faced some really good guys. Obviously, Malik Washington did his thing for Virginia, but has Louisville faced a team with weapons from 1 to 6 as good as Florida State, and as good as 1 to 2 with Johnny Wilson, who is 6'7", and Keon Coleman, who is built like a Ford F-150? Like, is Louisville right now? I mean, look, we know Jarvis Brownlee had the pick. We know he came back. He's healthy. Did we get an update on Cam Kelly? Did we know any kind of injury situation on him after he went out late in the fourth quarter? I mean, I'm worried about this secondary in terms of health. Storm Duck didn't play great last week. Quincy Raleigh didn't play great. Unless they come back in a major way, this Florida State team is built to, even if you make them throw the ball, they've got the dudes to do it.
But somebody's got to deliver it, though. I mean, if you get him under pressure, moving out of the pocket, Matt, you know better than I. You've paid attention to Florida State this year. I haven't watched much of any Florida State, to be honest.
Yeah, no, they've got, that's the thing. They've got dudes all over the field. They're really good. There are two things that they excel in most are dropping in pass coverage and in pass rush, which really isn't a great combo, but I mean, it's a 1-2 punch as it pertains to defending the pass, which if Louisville's going to get anything going against Florida State, it's probably going to be, getting the ground game going, because Florida State has been sort of susceptible to that at times. Now, granted, they still have a great defense, like as a whole, who can stop stop any offense no matter what they throw at them. But if they, I think the recipe for Louisville in this game offensively is going to have to be running the ball and like kind of forcing the defense to kind of cater to that, because the way that Florida State plays against the pass, I mean, if this devolves, if Louisville goes on early and they have to throw the ball, they might get boat raced, because Florida State is really good at defending the pass.
And look, this defense is, I mean, again, Notre Dame came in here. I think it was Duke. Somebody else has had a top 20 defense that was very random. I cannot remember who
Notre
it was.
Dame. I mean, Notre Dame's top 20.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Notre Dame is a solid defense, but this is by far the best defense Louisville's played. Miami had a really decent defense. I think they were statistically good. I think it was at stopping their.
They had a talented defense. They had a shit coach.
Yeah, but they had we went through the numbers last week. I mean, their numbers were top 20 defensively in some of the areas. I cannot remember specifically, but when you look at Florida State this year, here's a fun statistic for you. Actually, I'm gonna quiz you. Do you know who scored the most points against Florida State this season? Which team in the in their 12-game schedule?
BC.
BC, wasn't it?
It was, yes, 29 points. That's it. They've not allowed more points than that. That's
Manos.
That is crazy. This defense is they are stacked, man. They are built like an old school Florida State team, man. Like, I know last year, Vince, you got us in trouble. This year, they're going to love us. And maybe they'll sleep on Louisville a little bit more because they're listening. But this team, man, defensively, like, the fact that Jared Verse came back was just insane to me, because he'd done enough to be probably a second-round pick last year. And I remember joking on them, being like, "Oh, your best player is a pass rusher from Albany. Like, who the fuck is that?" Right? And then it's like,
and he's not even been their best defender this season.
No,
that's the crazy part.
Right? You have Kalen DeRoche. I mean, you have or Deloach, and then you've got freaking Brandon Fisk, the defensive lineman. I mean, you've got all these dudes from Florida State who freaking get after it, man. I think they've got two guys with 7 sacks each, right? And then you have 2 with 5. A couple with 3, 2, and then a couple with 1.5. I mean, they have 38 sacks, I believe, on the season this year. They have not really necessarily been a team that has created like a ton of havoc plays. They're not top 10, top 5, but they get after the quarterback. They've got solid tackling linebackers. Deloach and Tatum Bethune are as pretty much surefire as you can get. They're athletic, they're speedy, and then they have a secondary that covers well. So, I mean, really, for me, like, when you look at this last week against Florida, and that's what I have to go off of, most recently, because, look, defensively, they didn't lose their star like they did offensively. But of course, when those things happen, your team kind of takes a hit. It's emotional toll across the board when you have an injury like that. But last week against Florida, I mean, they gave up a big rushing day to Florida, who's not, like we said, they're not world beaters by any means. And so that makes me think, can Louisville get the run game going? Can Louisville take care of business? And so, Vince, when a team has a stout front four, when they have solid edge rushers and then speedy linebackers that are surefire tacklers, defensive backs who can tackle, how do you attack that as a running attack? Like, do you we saw this past week that there was a lot of misdirection, some of that outside zone, the fake option. They ran that a couple of times. What does Louisville do running the football this week to try to get Jaws and Gary Endo to have big days against a really good run defense?
Well, if I had the answer to that, I'd be making a lot more money right now, Jacob. But
that's what we pay you around here for. What is this, man?
I mean,
the highest paid podcaster in history is what we aspire for you to be someday. You're not now, but someday.
I mean, for me, it's I don't know, man. You could run the multiple different ways. Personally, I'm a big fan of misdirection stuff to get people moving, jet motions, fly motions, things like that, to be able to, like we were talking about Ben Perry earlier. If we can get their linebackers talking and having to communicate and talk to other people around the field and get people off their track, then I like our chances. And again, who's to say that Louisville's offensive line can't come out and just have a damn good day and get underneath somebody's pad level? It's football at the end of the day. And if you really want to, be good at blocking people, the Philadelphia Eagles do it the best. It's big man on big man. It's body on body. We're just going to move you. So, I mean, at the same time, there's a want to and a will a guy like Brian Hudson who's playing out there freaking bandaged, taped up, can barely make it to practice type deal. Like, you got a guy like that out there leading your offense, leading it up front. It's hard not to block your ass off for somebody like that.
Yeah, and I think the thing that Florida State's got to be licking their chops at is that the interior of that line struggled with Deion Walker, struggled with some of the big men from Kentucky, and they are built similarly. I mean, they're not as big, not as heavy, like weight-wise, but they are just as athletic, just as strong, and they have proven that they can get after the quarterback. I will say, though, I mean, in terms of the numbers, I said they're a good run defense. They're 45th nationally as a run defense. I mean, that would be their weakness if you're looking at it on paper. I mean, that's the thing, is that they do have games where they have given up some big rushing attacks. I mean, some of that has come in garbage time because in these games, some of them have been close. Yes, you have the BC game. You have a couple of others that were nail biters like Clemson in overtime. But I mean, 41-3 against Syracuse, 38-20. I mean, they opened that game up against Duke late.
The thing I was looking at, Jacob, like, is the halftime scores. And I don't know if I was correct or wrong or whatever. Nobody ended up double checking me on the podcast. So thanks, guys. But I mean, it seemed like they were tying or trailing, or it was extremely tight going into halftime at all the games, and the halftime adjustments really what won Florida State those games. Yeah. So that's something that concerns me with how Kentucky just did us. We have more momentum. Kentucky makes great halftime adjustments. Obviously, we have things go wrong for us as well, but it all plays hand in hand. So that's what worries me.
Yeah, no doubt. And here's the other thing. Here's what I'll say. Here's my bold prediction for the weekend. If Louisville gets 2 turnovers in this game, they win the football game. I will make that bet right now with you, because Florida State, first in the country in turnovers lost. They do not turn the football over. They have 5 turnovers on the season.
Well, like, they didn't turn the football over with Jordan Travis.
That's correct.
Exactly. You can force Tate to, if we can stop the run, force Tate to throw in these uncomfortable situations. If I'm Ashton and Mason, I'm getting a hand on him at all times. How Max Crosby does it. If y'all ever pay attention to Max Crosby,
yeah,
Tua was talking about it in the Hard Knocks. Like, you just got to bump me, keep bumping me, pull on my jersey, whatever. If just let him know, like, hey, we're right here. We're one step away. All it takes is for your dude to miss us for a split second, and we're on your ass.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, one thing about this defense that I really do admire week to week is they love to hit the quarterback. I mean, they did it against Miami so many times where you're like, damn, man, really? Like, I feel bad for the guy a little bit. No, I'm just like I want them to continue to punish him, but the poor guy, you hear the story about how his skin is separated from his muscle and they're just throwing him like he's a rag doll.
That's who you want as a quarterback, right?
Who's you? Me? Not me.
I said Matt.
Me. You. Yeah, well, not me. But anyways, point being, in this game for Louisville, they can hit the quarterback. They can get to them. Mason, Jeff Clark, Jared Dawson, Des Tell, Ramon Purier. Obviously, you have Ashton. You've got, some of the other guys. Why didn't Stephen Heron play on Saturday, Matt?
I could not figure that out. I know he had from what I was told, it was an upper body injury, but I don't know when he suffered it. I don't know the severity of it. All I was told of it was upper body, and I don't really have an update for that since.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, hopefully they can get him back on the field because, again, all the dudes you want, or all the dudes you can get, you need out there against a team like Florida State. This season, if you're curious, though, they are tied 46 in the country in sacks allowed. They give up close to about 2 per game, 49th in the country in tackles for loss, roughly about 5.5 per game. So there's an opportunity there for Louisville to hopefully try to get some pressure, try to make things difficult for the quarterback, and really then, you need guys like TJ Quinn, Jalen Alderman, Ben Perry, Cam Kelly, Devin Neal. You need all the guys that you can get to step up at the linebacker position. You even need guys like, Stanquan Clark, Jackson Hamilton, some of these secondary guys to step in and make plays because, I think that not only did Louisville struggle, but we didn't see them go to anyone else in those spots, right? Their depth is limited in some of these places. So you need guys to step up and play well. And it's a big challenge, man. Florida State is 4th in the country, I believe. And almost, if they win this game, almost a damn near lock to make the college football playoff. So you got your opportunity to make a statement.
25 all conference players all conference.
That's insane.
And
That's
this is
stupid, man.
Yeah, and this is a team 2 years ago that they were ready to run Mike Norvell out of town because they couldn't get an offensive line in there. They couldn't get any type of playmakers. The quarterback was a revolving, I mean, I know they got Jordan Travis in there ultimately, but they played a couple of other guys. So, Mike Norvell has really turned Florida State around and really put them right back to where they were. Can they sustain it is now the question for Florida State. Can they get to the playoff and really feel like they, everything this season ultimately was worth it to get to that mountaintop? I don't think anyone thinks that they're going to be able to knock off any of the top 4 teams or top 3 teams in the country. But still, it's great to see them back. It makes the ACC better as a whole. And for the last couple of years, it's been a really competitive rivalry between Louisville and Florida State. I'm really hoping we're going to see a close game. I know there's been some outliers with the 2016 game and some of the others, but these games have always been competitive, and now it's for all the marbles. I mean, that's the best part, right? I mean, can you imagine Vince telling 2016 Vince Lococo that Louisville was going to get to play in the ACC Championship against Florida State? I mean, yeah, you might.
Yes.
Well, you didn't.
I didn't expect 2018 to happen. I thought it was all freaking. I thought we were skyrocketing to the moon.
It's just all uphill from there.
No, I did have a moment where I'm like, damn, this is a Heisman Trophy winner, freaking all these wins in year one.
Yeah. Well, let's do this. Let's quickly run through Matt's stats, and then we will run through predictions. I want to save the final probably 5 to 10 minutes of the show to talk about just the transfer portal and things picking up where Louisville needs some attention. So, Matt, take us through a very quick version of Matt's stats.
So last week, I know I talked about how talented Miami is still, even though their record wasn't that good. They had a really high overall grade, according to Pro Football Focus. And Florida State is kind of the same way, except they've got an undefeated record. Their overall PFF grade is 92.7, which is 9th in all of the FBS. Fortunately, Louisville's already played 2 teams in the top 20. They've played Miami, obviously, which they're now 14th at 19.2 overall. And Notre Dame is actually number 3 in the country in terms of the overall Pro Football Focus grade at 94.6. So that's already 2 top 20 teams that Louisville has faced before in terms of the advanced analytics. So, I mean, they've definitely faced teams of this talent before. So that helps them. And this kind of shows you how this next stat shows you how different the capabilities of Florida State's offense is without Jordan Travis. So Jordan Travis, his overall offensive grade, 87.3. And as I've said before, 60s average, 70s above average. So having one damn near close to 90, pretty good.
If our fans, hold on, Matt, sorry to cut you off. If our fans don't know that stat by the end of this season, then
Good point. But with Tate Rodemaker, it's obviously a really small sample size. He's only had really a game and a half of action where he is the guy, but his overall offensive grade is 73.3, which is still good, but it's not anywhere close to what Jordan Travis just was. And when you kind of dive into some of the advanced analytics, you can very much tell that while he is a guy who has raw talent, he doesn't necessarily have a lot of reps and experience at this level. I say that because when he's kept clean, which is about 63.5% of his snaps, he's 26 of 39 for 388 yards and 3 touchdowns and has a grade in that situation of 90.8, which is, pretty damn good. But when he faces pressure, which is about a third of his snaps, he's only 6 of 17 for 122 yards and 2 touchdowns. And he's only got an offensive grade of 44.6. So he's not used to consistent pressure at the Power 5 and ACC level. So it's going to be imperative for Louisville to kind of generate some sort of pressure or get home in their pressure, especially because I haven't seen a ton of film, obviously, on Rodemaker because he's only played in a couple games this season. But just looking at some of the splits and on some of his throwing stats, it seems like he tends to favor some of the more, I don't want to say easier throw, but some of the more comfortable throws. Because when you look at the numbers on throws that are between 0 and 19 yards downfield, he's 19 of 29 for 309 yards and 3 touchdowns. Pretty good given the sample size. But on throws that go further down the field, more than 20 yards, he's only taken 9 attempts and completed 3 of them. Of course, that's 102 yards and a touchdown, but at that point, you're throwing a deep shot, and all you really need is one of them to connect to get a deep chunk. The point being is that he's not a quarterback like Travis, who is going to try and stretch the field, who is going to try and he's going to see Johnny Wilson and his 6'7" self say like, hey, he's got a mismatch there. I'm going to throw it deep to him. Or look at Keon Coleman and him blazing to the field. Like, oh, hey, he's got his man beat. I'm going to throw a deep bomb to him. He hasn't reached that level of comfortability yet and chemistry with his receivers. So he's going to tend to try and favor more of the short to intermediate throws than some of those big chunk plays that Jordan Travis would obviously try and go for. And then my last stat is just for the FSU defense as a whole, just to kind of encapsulate how fucking good they are. I talked earlier about how good they are at rushing the passer and sitting back in coverage and how imperative it would be for them to, get the run going. Their pass rush grade of 89.4 is 6th in the FBS. Their coverage grade of 91.2 is 8th in the FBS. So no matter how you slice it, if you're throwing the ball, they're good at defending it. And it's not just against the pass. They're good against the run too. In fact, they've got 5 defenders with triple-digit snaps on defense logged with an 80-plus grade. 12 defenders with triple-digit defensive snaps logged and a 70-plus grade. So they've got dudes all over the field. So if there's a weakness on Florida State's defense, which is probably against the run, I see air quotations weakness, they've got to exploit it. Because if you don't quote unquote take what the defense gives you, Florida State's going to make it a long afternoon or a long evening, really.
Matt, let me ask you, because you watched their last game and I did not. The thing that worried me a lot about Jordan was the fact that he can run as well. Does he have those abilities, like those same abilities to extend the play, take off and run? Like, he
can extend the play a teeny bit, but he definitely does not nearly have the legs and play extending capabilities that Jordan Travis has with his legs. He's not like a statue per se. Like he'll move around a little bit, but I mean, it's definitely not something he's comfortable doing.
And you just guarantee he's going to run for like 40 yards, like for sure. He's going to be like
big
play. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. All right, let's quickly roll through predictions. We'll do this as we do and have for the last couple of weeks. We'll do our score predictions and then we'll do our first touchdown score. Last week, just to recap, none of us got the score and or the opponent correct. Unfortunately, we all picked Louisville. Kentucky obviously walks away. However, myself and Presley both chose Jawar Jordan as the first touchdown scorer. So we have been awarded a point that brings all of us to a 4-way tie. So we were right back where we were a couple of weeks ago. We've all taken our turns at the top of the leaderboard, but now we are back. And so these last couple of weeks, they matter. So tonight, fellas, score first touchdown score. I will go first here, and I'm going to go Florida State 27, Louisville 21. With Jawar Jordan being the first scorer. I think we've talked a little bit tonight about some of the concerns for Louisville. I think that they're going to have to pass the football to some degree. And ultimately, while we've seen Jack play well in some moments, particularly in the fourth quarter of games, we've also seen him really throw some untimely interceptions, fumble the football in an untimely manner. And I just expect that to be the case this weekend. I think that Louisville is good. And I think that they're going to be very competitive in this game. I don't think that by any means Florida State is going to roll over or dominate them. But I do think at the end of the day, Florida State's just got too many weapons and Keon Coleman, Trey Benson. They've got a strong offensive line. And then defensively, they've got a front seven that's just built to ultimately wear you down and dominate. So I'm going to go Louisville dropping this one. But ultimately, it's a close game.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I've got Florida State 34, Louisville 27. I mean, while Louisville, I would argue, probably has the edge coaching wise, I think the talent discrepancy and while the gap in talent has been starting to close a little bit, I think the gap is still wide enough to where Florida State should be, the clear favorite in this one. So they've got the tools to beat you in really any way they want. I mean, some manners are more effective than others, obviously, but I mean, it's going to be tough sledding. So, and my first touchdown pick, I'm actually going to go with Nate Kariski. He's, performed well the last couple games or so, and he's really starting to get things going. So I think they're going to utilize him and kind of utilize that tight end group as a whole a little bit more.
That's a solid pick for first touchdown, Matt. I'm not
you.
gonna lie. I could definitely see that one happening in like Jeff's scripted offense, 100%. I'm gonna go just to be a winner, so I can win the predictions. 35-28 Cards. I think it's gonna come down to like one of the last two drives. I think it's gonna be definitely a slugfest of the game, throwing punches. Defense obviously hasn't looked good, so they're gonna put up some points. Like Matt said, the coaching advantage, I never really thought about that until you just said that a couple minutes ago. But I do think Jeff the staff as a whole is better than whatever Mike Norvell has over there. First TD scorer, though. What are we thinking? I said Quincy Riley last week, and I was dead wrong on that one.
Yeah, I might encourage you to stay away from the defense, but I do appreciate.
Hey, I mean, it was a good effort, right? I mean,
yeah. No, I think you could go in a number of directions here. Here, I'll give you real quick while you ponder that one. Presley, just for throwing this in here, we've missed his prediction the last couple of weeks, but he's got Florida State 34, Louisville 33. First TD score being Jamari Thrash. So if that
Jamari Thrash, that's another good one. I could see that being scripted in offense. A little deep post to Jamari Thrash. Obviously, you can see Jawar scoring. I'm gonna go Jack Plummer.
Okay, I like that.
So we're gonna get down to the red zone, right? And everybody's gonna assume we're running it with Jaws or Isaac or somebody, and Jack's gonna hit him with a bootleg, walk it in Peyton Manning style. This old man sheriff walking in the end zone, but ultimately, Cards got to win. But you're not going to win in any type of football game making the mistakes we made against Kentucky, and I'm banking on us not making those mistakes again.
All right, man. I love that. I think that's the ultimately the key this weekend is not turning the football over and forcing Florida State into turnovers. And so last thing here, we'll just try to run through this in a somewhat brief manner is the turnover in which you can expect on Louisville football's roster and really all of the rosters across the country. I'm already preparing to hear what's going on at Louisville. Why is there a mass exodus? Because every year you have at least, 5 to 15 transfers, and that's just the nature of the beast here with college football. But I do think it's a very interesting conversation that is taking place across social media about the Louisville quarterback position, about the transfer portal and how to best utilize it this offseason. And I think we can all agree that Louisville is really in a spot now to take that next step up in talent. They've won at the highest level in the ACC this year. They did so with a lot of transfers, including a quarterback who was ultimately an all ACC player. And so now you've really kind of proven that you can get guys, develop them and make them better. So for Louisville, the ceiling really is sky high in what they can do this offseason. And it starts at quarterback, right? So just by the nature of deflection this past weekend, we saw 3 quarterbacks on Louisville's roster celebrated, and Jack Plummer, Evan Conley, and Brock Doman. All 3 will move on at the end of the season. And that leaves a massive hole, as those are essentially your top 3 guys on the depth chart by default, by just the general overall hype. It seems that Pierce Clarkson is built to step into this role, but I think that everyone across the Louisville fan base sees to some extent that you need some guys to either help him, to compete with him, or potentially another guy to come in and bridge the gap. So, we've seen Will Howard from Kansas State, Will Rogers from Mississippi State. We've seen the quarterback, I believe, from Tulane. I think his name is Michael Pratt.
He's going to the league. He's not going to the portal.
Okay, he's not in the portal. So we've seen, regardless, we've seen some quarterbacks already start to jump in there. I think Michigan State starter jumped into the portal. Yeah, and then Tyler Van Dyke down at Miami is the name that's really kind of, got people's ears perked up after the tweet from Jody Demling to say that he's kind of one to watch for Louisville football. So I just am curious on your all's take on where you stand with the quarterback position. Is it, in your opinion, that they need another Jack Plummer for one more year? They need to upgrade a Jack Plummer, or is it Pierce Clarkson time?
Let me go first because I know you have great opinions on this. I don't think you're going to win a national championship with any of the guys out there that are putting their names in the portal. That's just my opinion. The guys we have, like your TBDs, boy from Kansas State, All these guys, like, I just don't think that I don't think that they can win a national championship. I think we need to bring one in, definitely, but I just don't know. See, that's where it's weird. Like, I think we need to bring one in for depth purposes, not to be, but obviously you bring him in to compete with the starting job too at the same time.
Right.
That's like the weird, like,
yeah, you can't
caveat.
go out
Like, I want to see Pierce, but I mean, if the dude wins the starting job, then so be it. He wins the starting job.
The hard part is you can't go out and sell this to a Will Rogers, to a well, what's the kid's name from Washington State who everyone is kind of
Cam
anticipating? Yeah, Cam Ward, that everyone's kind of anticipating will hit the portal and probably could become a star. I mean, Jaden Daniels, was he not a transfer? Didn't he start at Arizona State, if I'm not mistaken? Ultimately went to LSU. I could have sworn, maybe I'm wrong on that. But he's going to win the Heisman. So I mean, there are, these guys that do hit the portal every year that are, at the top of the list. Caleb Williams from Oklahoma to USC a couple of years ago. I mean, you do hit that from time to time, but I do agree with you. At its best, it's likely another Jack Plummer.
And that's kind of what I want. I liked what you said right there, Jacob, where like, let's get another Jack Plummer, because if Pierce can't beat out Jack Plummer, then he's not winning this national championship.
That's a good point.
Here's my thing. I mean, it's not a matter of the coaching staff like thinking less of like the guys they have in their current quarterback room, because I mean, obviously they have confidence in them, otherwise they wouldn't be there in the first place. But I mean, Jeff made it very clear, like even in his opening press conference when he was first hired, that like he subscribes to the Howard Schellenberger school of thought, in that like just have a shitload of guys in the position and just have the competition, breed out the winner. And Jeff Brohm, we've already seen in just one recruiting portal recruiting cycle that he is like this. I mean, there were 6 scholarship quarterbacks and 9 total on the roster. I believe that's what the numbers was. I'm not entirely sure on that, but it's, it's ballpark. It's, the point still stands. I mean, they like who they have, but if you have the ability and the option to grab someone with high level experience, high level production, I don't see why you would pass that up. Because I mean, no offense to Pierce Clarkson or Brady Allen, but we have not seen them in a game yet. For all we know, they have great talent. I've seen them both in fall camp. I mean, I think Pierce looked much better in fall camp than Brady Allen did, because Brady Allen didn't look that great, but that's besides the point. We don't know what they look like in game yet. They could be phenomenal. They could struggle. We don't know. But with some of these portal guys, you have an idea of what you are getting. That's the biggest thing. And if you bring in a guy like that, maybe that could also motivate the guys behind them to try and compete harder and maybe even get themselves in a position to win as the starter. And if that is the case, then the guy that was brought in is probably going to leave in the post-spring transfer portal window anyways, and then you'll have the guy that you're going to actually start with, and he'll have been fueled from the previous competition to get better.
Yeah, spring football is going to be super telling. And like, as much as I'm sure Jeff will have them splitting reps, I mean, it's very easy to split your quarterback reps up in practice, y'all. Like, they're standing right there next to the quarterback coach at all times. You can sub one in, sub one out, no problem. So, I mean, Pierce or Brady or whoever is getting in that rotation, will be able to sit back and, as a man, sit back and say, he is beating me out right now. Like, and he might have a million excuses of, somebody might have a million excuses if somebody ain't catching the ball, not running the right plays, X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, you just got beat out for your job, and that's what it is.
Yeah, I think the thing that's really interesting to kind of keep in mind is what does the eligibility look like of a quarterback that you bring in? You don't need, why would you bring in anything other than a graduate transfer at this point? Because you have Pierce, right? So you don't need a guy who's an underclassman unless they are truly a depth piece. The other thing is, what made Jack Plummer the easy choice was that he had familiarity with Jeff Brohm and that he had played in that system. He knew the offense. It was an easy plug and play. where any guy who comes in at this point is going to be behind in the offense to Pierce Clarkson and to Harrison Bailey and to Brady Allen. So there's not that guy out there that I'm aware of who is a former Jeff Brohm player, right? Hudson Card was the quarterback at Purdue last year, who transferred in from Texas, I believe. So not even a Jeff Brohm guy, right? He played for Ryan Walters this past season. So there's not that guy out there who played for Jeff Brohm. That guy is in the system already in Brady Allen. So at this point, in my opinion, you're already kind of narrowing yourself down to a 1-year guy. And how many 1-year guys are really going to be out there who are dynamic, who can change the landscape of your season? Because while I think that Louisville could, in theory, go all in on a Cam Ward or a star guy and then build, go out and land a ton of offensive linemen and wide receivers to build around, I think more likely is that next year is kind of the build up to the year after. And next year is where you get these guys like Pierce and some of the younger players more involved and get them built in and really really immersed and assimilated into your system. And then the next year you come back and you complement them with the star players to build around them. I don't think necessarily I'm saying that you go in next year as saying, let's go 6-6 and rebuild. No, I still think you can win 8-9 games. But I think, in my opinion, I am in the mold of let's go all in on Pierce Clarkson, Brady Allen. Let's go in on these guys that you brought in this past year, had a year to be, the Pat Mahomes to Jack Plummer's Alex Smith. Not saying that any of those guys are that, but just whatever quarterback analogy you want to use. And then let them compete, of course. But let's go into this saying, we don't need a Will Rogers. We don't need a Riley Leonard. We don't need a star quarterback. We have our star. We need depth and we need competition. And if that guy ultimately emerges as the starter, that's great. But if not, Pierce is our guy. We're ready to get Flyville and the future of this program ready to go. Because look, man, this isn't some 3-star kid. Like, this is a former top 300 player who wants nothing more and has really already shown he can be the face of the program. We got to see it on the field. But in terms of all the intangibles, like, he's shown he can do all of that. He can be the face of your program. He can lead. He can be all of these things. And so I think let's give him the opportunity to do that. He's a redshirt freshman. But the pictures I saw, Pierce looking a little beefy, man. He beefed up late in the season. Like, I'm ready. He's not the same little 175-pound kid running around out there. Like, he's got a year in the offense, a year of maturity. Some of these weapons are back. I don't know, man. I'm on the boat. Let's get Pierce in there.
It's all on those guys and whether or not they're putting their head in the playbook and putting in the extra work that's going to be required for you to run a Jeff Brohm offense. Like, it's not just your normal Scott Satterfield install. It's not the same. Like, it is. You saw Jack out there checking plays. We never saw Malik checking plays in the 3 or 4 years that he was in Sat's offense. We never saw guys doing that. That's the freedom you have. That's the freedom you have in the Jeff Brohm offense.
It's going to be really interesting to see where they attack first. In terms of overall needs, quarterback, of course, they need guys. Right now they have we'll have 2 scholarship players as of the end of this season at quarterback, and that's just not enough to feel comfortable, especially 2 guys that have never taken a college football snap outside of blowouts this season. But then, I mean, when you look at their roster, right, they're going to lose several key offensive linemen, including Brian Hudson, including Willie Tyler at left tackle. They're going to lose some defensive linemen. Likely Ashton Gelati will head to the NFL. They're going to lose some, obviously some secondary players in Storm Duck and Jarvis Brownlee and, Cam Kelly. A lot of these guys are moving on. And so they are going to very much need to attack the portal and add quality starters. But in terms of what you place the most value at, I know a lot of people have it as the quarterback. To me, it's build from, look at what you've done well this season and build that, right? They didn't have a star quarterback. They built an offensive line that could that could block to run the football, run the play action, that is efficient enough to get the passing game going, have star wide receivers, have a stud defensive end, be able to brush the quarterback, and then have secondary guys who, as a unit, are good enough to contribute and make you better. I think this season you need to see them go all in on the offensive lineman. You need a new left tackle. You need a new center. Both of those are two spots you should be able to fill in the portal. You go on the other side of the ball, you need a defensive end. You likely need a nose tackle, a defensive tackle. You need a couple of linebackers, and you definitely need a brand new crop of starting cornerbacks. Like you're asking Trey Franklin, Marquise Crowes, Killebrew, and Marcus Washington to step into roles next year as starters. And again, no experience there between the three of them outside of Trey Franklin. So it's interesting. Matt, I'll let you have the closing thought here on the portal and maybe just your overall thoughts on, whether it's what Louisville will lose or what Louisville will add, kind of what you're watching for over the next couple of weeks, because it's going to pick up on Sunday and beyond as Louisville gets to the bowl game and ultimately the offseason.
Yeah, obviously, quarterback's the big one. It's because, it's the most important position in all of sports, so people are going to want to gravitate towards that. But no, I'm with you, Jacob, in that, like, if you want to have a successful football team, it starts in the trenches and builds outwards. Just so they need to put an emphasis on offensive linemen, get a couple defensive linemen in. But I think another position that they should probably emphasize is tight end. Like try and get themselves like an average to above average, go-to tight end in the passing game, because that's like that was the one thing that the passing game was certainly lacking up until like the last 2 games.
Yeah.
And then on defense, get a couple D linemen. I already said that. But defensive backs, they're going to replace a lot of people back there. Jarvis, Storm, Quincy, Cam Kelly, I think, is in his last year. DBs are going to be at a premium for sure. I think linebackers should be fine. Maybe bring in one more just in case. But I think in terms of numbers, it's probably where they're the most sound at.
Jared Casey just put his name in the portal. Old Ballard kid, Kentucky.
Yeah, I saw that.
I can't remember where he
started at Kentucky and then went to Indiana. Yeah,
you guys are forgetting one key position. Dwayne Martin graduates as well.
Fullback.
Fullback.
Action. Yeah, man.
What are we gonna do?
Hey, there's got to be another Lococo out there somewhere. A Lococo or a Martin. There's somebody out there that we.
There's always a Nord or a Martin.
A Nord, a Tronzo. Right. Like there's somebody with the fullback last name for sure. But yeah, definitely. I mean, look, you have to commend them for how they were able to go out to the portal, but they also had a lot of leftovers on the roster. And this season they lose a lot of those guys. Really going to be ushering in a new era. But I've seen several guys from Purdue hit the portal already, including their top 2 wide receivers, an offensive lineman, a defensive lineman. Louisville's after, I think it's a Harvard defensive lineman whose last name is Slackman, who I just can't wait to get in here and get an NIL deal with Sackman. I mean, it's perfect for the show. Thor Griffith, I don't know where he's from, but his name is Thor, so he's got to be a badass.
I think Yale, if I remember.
And then they have a Division II offensive lineman visiting this weekend. So, I mean, there's a lot going on in the portal already. Again, I would expect that you will see guys go ahead and hit the portal before the bowl game. You will see, potentially. I mean, again, I'm not advocating for this, but I wouldn't be shocked if, you see an Ashton sit out. I mean, at this point, he's not projected high enough to where you feel like that's going to happen, but it could in theory just to protect himself. There's also still a chance that Ashton comes back too. Like Vince was talking about, it's 1-year season. Jared Verse came back after last season. So you just never know where guys get projected and where they might fall. So a lot of storylines, things are really heating up and we're heading into the end of the season. And so that's kind of the crazy part. And while we continue to scream from the mountaintop that football never sleeps, like there is no off season in football, at least in terms for us talking about it. So that'll do it for the show tonight. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I know it's a little bit of a longer episode, but a lot to dive into this past week. And of course, a lot to get into this week with the ACC Championship. I say this, and we will really, truly test the ability of our technology, but we are planning to be out to do a live show on Monday from Frankfort Avenue Liquor post ACC Championship, post bowl announcement on Sunday. We should get all of that information. So a lot to react to on Monday. So we will be out there. We encourage you to support them. Check out Frankfort Avenue Liquors, the presenting sponsor of the show. Check out Kern's Corner. Check out stateoflouisville.com. Check out the Louisville Report. Follow Matt McGavick and continue to listen to the show because we are just getting started as we head into the offseason. Can't thank you all enough for a great year. Hopefully we can cap it off with an ACC championship. Really would would really put the cherry on top for the show here. And guys, you talk about what we've accomplished and what we did to get them to the ACC Championship, then to get them a title. I mean, come on now. What would you not?
So much baloney this year.
So much baloney. My baloney bill is through the roof, man. All right.
Get a 5-star card.
We will catch you all next week. Hopefully it's ACC champions. And then until then, go Cards.